Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
I've heard it said before, like, it was a very smart man named Robert Meyer Burnett who said the currency of our current age is authenticity. And it's so true.
Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and, of course, the never-to-be-defined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I'm Robcasting at you right here from the Robservatory. And this is, of course, Robservations episode number 989. I'm looking a little foggy tonight. I don't know if that's because I put my finger on the camera. I'm sorry about that. Anyway, again, thank you very much for that incredible Kickstarter. It was a lot of fun yesterday. I want to thank Gary Nerdrotic himself for bringing me on the show to gin up some support from his big fan base to help us. And really, we were able to generate almost $13,000 in a couple of hours. So thanks to him, and thanks to a lot of you who watched the channel. I had a very funny live stream on Instagram. I didn't know you could be live on Instagram and people could join in. I'd never done that before, so that was amazing. And then jumping on to Kickstarter with my unhinged hucksterism. I was almost like I should have Rob telethons all the time. I don't know if I could handle it or my heart could handle it, but for 15 minutes, it was a lot of fun. So thank you. So this is kind of a different kind of a Robservations. I hear a lot of when I was growing up, I liked school. I didn't really get into trouble, and I wasn't the best student because my mind was occupied with a million other things, but I really liked school, and I liked my teachers. I had teachers like Carol Pinky, who taught Utopia. I had Chip Wall, who taught ELP, the Extended Learning Program, and I was friends with him all through high school. And I had a lot of people. I had Mr. Johnson for Earth Science, who accused me of cheating off Sabika Jaddy on December 7th, 1979. We were sitting 2 students to a desk. Well, that day was when Star Trek The Motion Picture opened. So let me just tell you, Mr. Johnson, I don't think you're probably with us anymore, but Sabika Jaddy is, and she knows I wasn't cheating off her. But anyway, I was just thinking about seeing Star Trek The Motion Picture. But still, Mr. MacArthur, who he was the first teacher I had in the 7th grade when I went to junior high. He got mad at me for reading the book The Entity, which the movie was later based on. And on that cover, it had a woman's face. Her neck was up, and it said, "Ravaged, night after night, preyed upon by a spectral rapist." Maybe not the best thing for a 12-year-old to bring to 7th grade, but hey, he knocked me on the wrist for that one. What can I say? Or Mrs. Ridenauer, my music teacher in 6th grade, who took my book, Lucifer's Hammer, written by Larry Niven and Jerry Pornell, and took it away from me, and I had to go see our principal, Boyd Matson, to get it back. I was reading Lucifer's Hammer in music class behind a music book, but music class was a little boring, so whatever. But I understand why she took it from me. She was a good teacher, and I still remember her name. Then, of course, there was Mrs. Bard, a.k.a. or later Mrs. Reith, who was like the hottest chick in when I was in 2nd grade. I was in love with my teacher. Who wasn't? Just saying. I mean, that's what school was all about. School's different now. School's different now, and I feel like one of the most, that we don't talk about it enough in this country, but I think one of the most beleaguered classes of people. Seriously. If we talk about teachers are the most beleaguered, discriminated against. They put up with the most shit. Being a teacher is a terrible way to make a living these days. Not necessarily because of the students, although I will say this, the teachers will tell you, at least a lot of the teachers that I talk to, they enjoy their students. They do. They tell me the same thing. I think the kids today are smart and they're getting better, but it's the parents. It's the parents that are a problem. And look, we live in a world where there's all these social narratives about the police, about racism, or about transphobia. There's all this stuff that we now take as gospel. And everyone's worried about offending everybody else, or how can we make lives better for people, and which is admirable. I'm a big fan of everybody. And I believe, as you know, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And I honestly believe that. But there are a lot of people that are trading in narratives these days that just aren't true. You know, it's interesting. Before social media, before the rise of the smartphone, I mean, you know, Jonathan Haidt will tell you all about this. I recommend everybody read a lot of Jonathan Haidt because he knows what's up. The smartphone was really introduced in 2007, but it had disseminated into our kids by about 2012. And that's when everything went to shit. That's when tribalism happened. Everybody was looking to find their whoever believed what they believed online. And since then, the level of incredible disinformation and all the things that people believe have gone to hell. I believe that humanity, in terms of all of us being nicer to one another, was on a pretty good course up to about 2012, and then it went to shit. And for the 12 years, all it's done is it's a giant fulcrum that has just created a bunch of animosity for everyone, which to me sucks as somebody like myself who enjoys people of all stripes, of all shapes, sizes, colors, and creeds. But man, online discourse has made sure that if people don't like you or don't like, I mean, hell, people will go look into your likes and people you follow and make judgments based upon those things and go out and try and get you canceled without even knowing who you are, without taking into consideration you might have a family, you might have a mortgage, you might have health concerns. They don't know. But if they decide they don't like you, it is, I mean, the fascism of the modern day is astonishing to me. But I'll tell you, bringing it back to teachers. Teachers have to put up with a lot. And all you have to do is talk to a teacher about the state of teaching today, and it's really depressing, especially for someone like me who really liked his teachers. I enjoyed interacting. Hey, look, one of the baseball furies has fallen over. I really enjoyed my teachers. I would never think to talk back to them. I mean, kids today can be pretty awful as well. But I'll tell you one thing. When I was in school, and I'm talking about Island Park Elementary School on Mercer Island, South Mercer Junior High, which is now Mercer Island, it's a middle school, and then Mercer Island High School. That was my experience. So I spent kindergarten through 6th grade at Island Park Elementary School, and before that I went to the JCC, the Jewish Community Center, for preschool, also on Mercer Island. So from preschool to 7 years at Island Park Elementary School to 3 years at South Mercer Junior High before it became a middle school the year I left. So I was never a freshman in high school. I went directly to being a sophomore, and the 8th graders became 9th graders. They were the first freshman class at Mercer Island High School. Ha ha. But anyway, I was at Mercer Island High School for another 3 years. So on Mercer Island, I went to school for the majority of my youth at the same place with the same group of people. And I liked my teachers. And the teachers were likable people too. And you know what? Some of those teachers, I knew for a fact, well, actually one of my favorite teachers died of AIDS, which was really tragic because he was a math teacher and he helped me a great deal in math. And I became friendly with him, and he was really into horse racing, as was my dad. So my dad when this teacher went to the Kentucky Derby once, he brought a poster home for my father. But I'll tell you something, I didn't know, and no one would have known, that he was gay. And there was a number of teachers we had who were gay because it wasn't a part of schooling. I didn't know anything about the personal life of my teachers, nor should I. The teachers, and I'll tell you something, one of the craziest things was always seeing a teacher in the wild. You'd run into a teacher one day. When we went to Hawaii for spring break, I ran into Mrs. Walton. I believe Mrs. Walton. It might have been Mrs. Fromm, but I couldn't believe it. I'm like, oh my God. I ran into a teacher in the wild. Bob Park, my 6th grade teacher. I ran into him. He was like the Marlboro man of elementary school teachers. I ran into him in the wild. I was like, oh my God, Mr. Park. Because, when you're a kid and when you're going to school, it was always my thought that those teachers didn't exist outside of school. Nor should they. We shouldn't have known. What a distraction that would have been if I knew anything. Nowadays, of course, you have all teachers on TikTok telling you everything they believe in and what they hope to bring to the classroom. They don't really talk about reading, writing, and arithmetic They talk about what they themselves, what their identity or what that they're going to bring to their kids. I'm like, when the fuck did that happen? When I don't fucking know, but I'm glad I never went to school during that time period because I don't want to know about you. I want you to teach me everything you know, teach me the subject at hand, make me, I want to be like V'ger in Star Trek The Motion Picture. Learn all that is learnable and take it home to your creator. I'd go home to my mom in the early part of elementary school. My mother had to shut me up at the dinner table because all I would do is recite what I'd learned that day at school because everything was amazing. Every fact, every multiplication table, learn to write in cursive, didn't matter what it was. Finally, my mom told me I had to shut up at the dinner table, which was pretty good because as a result, I got to watch Star Trek during dinner, which I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. She would either listen to me I went to Indian Guides when I was a kid. I don't know if that's politically incorrect now, but it predated Cub Scouts, but it was Indian Guides. You went with your dad, and my dad called me Chief Running Mouth. That was my, I guess we'd call it indigenous name now, but I can say I had a good childhood. Anyway, which brings me to something that happened this past week. I have a friend. They are a teacher, and they're teaching film to 11th graders, teaching film to 11th graders. And apparently where they teach, they had to get the parents to sign off on what was being taught. Let me tell you about speaking of Carol Pankey, who I had a major crush on. She actually deals with women's issues in Seattle. So you go, Carol Pankey. I still remember you. I had a massive crush on you. And she taught a class called Utopia. And in this class, we were studying various different groups that had, imagine this in a public school. We were studying, it wasn't really, we didn't really have honors courses, but it was like an accelerated class for smart kids or whatever, I don't know. But so we would study people's visions of utopian civilizations. And if we were doing somebody contemporary, we were allowed to go bring people from that group to come speak to our public school class. Somebody brought the Moonies, Reverend Sun Myung Moon. People don't remember who the Moonies were. Brought in representatives from the Moonies. Because I had recently discovered L. Ron Hubbard, not because of Scientology, but because he was a golden age science fiction writer. And recently, people know the movie. It was one of the worst movies ever made. But hey, Roger Christian, I'm sorry about that. But anyway, so I decided I'd read Battlefield Earth, the doorstop of a novel of the 31st century or whatever the fuck it was. And I read that whole book, The Planet Cyclo. I mean, the aliens were psychiatrists. Crazy. I mean, they were aliens, but they were really psychiatrists, sort of. So I read that book and I was very interested in Dianetics and Scientology. So I decided to do Scientology as my report. And you would study Scientology and you would give a lecture to the class. And then the next day, I was going to bring Scientologists in. And I did. I went to the Scientology Center. Now, I was fascinated by Scientology because as a kid, we went by the Scientology Center in Bellevue, which was very close to the John Dance Theater where I saw Logan's Run and Star Trek The Motion Picture and Superman the Movie. So I went past this place, and I thought in my mind it had something to do with science. Scientology. I didn't know what it was. I had no idea L. Ron Hubbard created a religion and all that. I didn't know anything about it. But as I got older, I kind of understood it. I did some studying about the whole founding of the religion and what it was all about. So I went to the Scientology Center. There I was, probably 16, 17. And I explained what I wanted them to do. And they're like, you're going to bring us to Mercer Island, which is now I could never afford to live there. Back then it was just upper middle class. You're going to bring us to Mercer Island High School so we can speak to high school students on Mercer Island. Let me just tell you, the dollar signs were going cha-ching, but they came. And, I'd already debunked a lot of what they had to say. I mean, I thought what was really interesting about it was there were certain aspects. I mean, I'm not going to get into the Thetans and all that crap, but there were certain aspects about Scientology that I thought was respectable. Not necessarily but how they had the mental discipline, that kind of thing. So I thought that was interesting. Did the report. Would that happen today in public school? Probably not. But it was a great time. Thank you, Carol Pankey. I still think of you. I mean, it's been, what was that? That was almost 40 years ago. but still thinking about you. One day maybe I should look you up. But she's got to be like 75 now or something. I don't even know. But anyway, so my friend, who's a teacher, teaching film, like an overview course of cinema to his 11th grade students. And he told me he wants to leave the profession because he can't deal with what goes on now. Because teachers aren't allowed to really teach general information. They're not even allowed to teach real history anymore. As many people will tell you, academia has been completely ideologically captured by people that are disingenuous in what they believe. And there's not a lot of real history going on there. It's all identity politics, and it's insane. But Jonathan Haidt, read Jonathan Haidt. He has many lectures, very impressive man. Anyway, so my friend tells me that he gets a letter. So apparently he has to have students have to sign a form to watch the movies. And the movies are very Hollywood. Over the last 30 years, a pretty general overview of Hollywood movies, populist Hollywood films. And I would like to read you a letter that he received from one of the mothers of one of his students. And let me find this. I had this and somehow it went away. I don't know. I had it right here, and why am I not seeing it? I prepared this class. Or I prepared this show. Here we go. And I'm going to change the names to protect the innocent, or guilty, as it were. So here is the letter. Oh, how this started out was he asked me for certain suggestions of certain kinds of movies, horror films, westerns, whatever. So I told him, I gave him some suggestions. And this is the letter that he received from a parent. And again, no names. Hi, Mr. So-and-so. It's blah, blah, blah. My daughter's mother in your 11th grade film class. I was actually a student at this school from 97 to 2002 when you, the teacher, had taught in the art department as well. So this teacher has been teaching for a long time, 25 years. And this woman was once a student of his and now has come back and her daughter is there. I just wanted to send you a quick message because I signed my daughter's form, but I noticed that all the films are directed by white male filmmakers, and you haven't selected any films that are directed by any women or people of color. Will there be other films or an opportunity for my daughter to explore how the perspectives of women and people of color filmmakers have shifted the lens and contributed to the cultural landscape as well? Or for the students to pick films that touch on your themes? I'm just a little concerned that she'll be experiencing basically my experience, where she, as a woman of color, is not represented on screen or behind the lens. Directors that are women of color have made a lot of headway in the last 20 years. For example, Celine Song, Korean-Canadian, whose first film, Past Lives, were nominated for Best Picture last year. Even Sofia Coppola or Greta Gerwig have directed some culturally significant films. Anyway, please let me know if you do have plans for some diverse points of view in film. First of all, the idea when I was going to school that a parent would chime in and tell a teacher what they should do. And I know now people would say, well, Rob, that's what should happen. Parents should. Really? Do parents know better than teachers? I mean, already you've got teachers. I understand there's a lot of teachers out there that need a stern talking to by parents. But for this, this teacher, as this woman said, has been around for 25 years, has probably put a lot of thought into the things that he's going to show. So when you hear something like this, Celine Song, I love Past Lives. I own Past Lives, but she just made it last year. Now here's my problem with a parent like this. Celine Song, Korean-Canadian filmmaker, great. Well, have you looked into movies that are actually Korean films? Korean cinema itself? It's not like no one's holding it back. No one's stopping you. Have you sat down with your daughter and explored different kinds of cinema yourself? Indian movies, Russian movies, Nigerian films. A lot of weird, crazy stuff going on in Nigeria these days. Films all around the world. There's a vibrant film industry. People have been making films all around the world for decades. No one is stopping you from sharing that with your child. Maybe what would be interesting is, as a mother, why don't you take it upon yourself? Let your child have a great general overview of cinema, and then perhaps you two together can delve in to female filmmakers or people of color and understand the significance of what people have done. And I was thinking about this, and I figured, well, why don't I take it upon myself to delve into some women, female filmmakers that have interesting perspectives, and people of color filmmakers that mattered a lot to American cinema. Why don't I choose to do that? And I'll tell you, Greta Gerwig and Sofia Coppola are not on my list. Not that I don't admire what they're doing, but I mean, if you want a little historical perspective, I'd like to delve into a few. Let's start with a female filmmaker. One of the most, in terms for me as a film editor and somebody who has done some incredible work, made one of the most amazing documentaries I've ever seen from a purely visual standpoint about the Olympics. And this filmmaker also made what many consider to be perhaps the greatest propaganda movie ever made. That's right, Triumph of the Will. And let's delve into her for a minute, shall we? Leni Riefenstahl. Leni Riefenstahl. Now, here's a female filmmaker that I think more people need to study and understand who and what she was. Leni Riefenstahl, Helene Riefenstahl, was a German dancer, actress, and film director, best known for her imposing propaganda films in support of the National Socialist, or aka Nazi Party. Born in Berlin on August 22, 1902, Riefenstahl began her long and extraordinary career as an interpretive dancer. After a knee injury temporarily halted her vocation, Riefenstahl became fascinated with the possibilities of the medium of film, especially nature films. She became the star of a number of German director Arnold Frank's silent motion pictures, typically set in the Alps, so-called Bergfilm. Dieter's going to kill me on that one, in which the young Riefenstahl figured as the athletic and daring female lead. Popular as an actress with German audiences in the silent era, Riefenstahl directed her first major feature, Das Blaulicht, The Blue Light, in 1932. The film was well received and, more importantly, attracted the attention of a rising politician who prided himself on having artistic ambitions, Adolf Hitler. In the same year, Riefenstahl had heard Hitler speak at a public rally and was riveted by his oratorical style and ability to mesmerize an audience. Propaganda for the Nazi Party. Leni Riefenstahl directs a film about Reich Party Day. Hitler saw Leni Riefenstahl as a director who could use her aesthetics to produce an image of a strong Germany imbued with Wagnerian motifs of power and beauty. In 1933, he asked Riefenstahl to direct a short film, Der Sieg des Glaubens, The Victory of Faith, shot at that year's Nuremberg Nazi Party rally. The film was a template for her more famous work, Triumph des Willens, Triumph of the Will, shot at the Nuremberg rally the following year. In 1934, Riefenstahl initially rebuffed Hitler's commission for the film, but relented when she received unlimited resources and full artistic license for the picture. Triumph of the Will, with its evocative images and innovative film technique, ranked as an epic work of documentary filmmaking and is widely regarded as one of the most masterful propaganda films ever produced. It won several awards, but forever linked the film's subject, National Socialism, with its artist, Riefenstahl. Equally stunning were Riefenstahl's directorial efforts in Olympia, which captured with haunting effectiveness the images of the 1936 Summer Olympic Games in Berlin. It was for Olympia that Riefenstahl pioneered numerous cinematography techniques, such as filming footage with cameras mounted on rails, commonly known today as tracking shots. Olympia's forceful blend of aesthetics, sports, and propaganda again won Riefenstahl accolades and awards, including Best Foreign Film honors at the Venice Film Festival and a special award from the International Olympic Committee for depicting the joy of sport. By her own account, the advent of World War II and the rapid escalation of violence under the Nazi regime had an unfavorable effect on both Riefenstahl and her career. Early in the Polish campaign, an incident seemed to have shaken Riefenstahl's confidence in the movement she had glorified in cinematic images. While accompanying German troops near Konski, the filmmaker witnessed the execution of Polish civilians shot in retaliation for a partisan attack on German troops. Riefenstahl apparently left her filming that day in order to make a personal appeal to Hitler against such arbitrary violence. The incident may have planted a seed of doubt in Riefenstahl's mind, but it did not prevent her from filming Hitler's triumphant parade into Warsaw just weeks later. Now, I read this not to be glib or flippant, but if you really want to delve into people that really made a difference, sometimes the history of those people could be unpleasant to you. You really want your daughter not to know things. You just want her to know things that you want her to know at a very surface level. And is that really helpful to your daughter? I don't know. But it bothers me immensely that you're asking. I understand it's a high school. It's just an overview class. I get it. I understand. But you know what? Are you doing her any favors? I don't know. Let's delve into somebody else who I think is an important figure, person of color, incredible filmmaker. Let's delve into him, shall we? Melvin Van Peebles, who, by the way, is an incredible filmmaker. Melvin Van Peebles, this is from the New York Times. It's his obituary. A fertile creative force, he wrote fiction and musicals, but is best known for a breakthrough movie that heralded the genre known as blaxploitation. This is by Douglas Martin, and it was published on September 22nd, 2021. Melvin Van Peebles, the filmmaker praised as the godfather of modern black cinema and a trailblazer in American independent movies, died on Tuesday at his home in Manhattan. He was 89. His death was announced by his son, Mario Van Peebles. Yes, that Mario Van Peebles, who directed New Jack City, the actor and director. A Renaissance man whose work spanned books, theater, and music, Mr. Van Peebles is best known for his third feature film, Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song, which drew mixed reviews when it was released in 1971, ignited intense debate, and became a national hit. The hero, Sweetback, starred in a sex show at a brothel, and the movie sizzled with explosive violence, explicit sex, and righteous antagonism toward the white power structure. It was dedicated to all the black brothers and sisters who've had enough of the man. Sounds exactly like what this student's mother wants her to see. Mr. Van Peebles' fiercely independent legacy can be seen in some of the most notable black films of the past half-century, from Spike Lee's She's Gotta Have It to Barry Jenkins' Moonlight. His death arrives at a moment when black storytelling has belatedly become ascendant in Hollywood. I didn't even know I had a legacy, he told the New York Times in 2010 when asked about his reputation and influence. I do what I want to do. Not only did Mr. Van Peebles write, direct, and score Sweet Sweetbacks and play the lead role, he also raised the money to produce it. The film demonstrated that a black director could convey a highly personal vision to a broad audience. For the first time in cinematic history in America, a movie speaks out of an undeniable black consciousness, Sam Washington wrote in the Chicago Sun-Times. In addition to making movies, Mr. Van Peebles published novels in French as well as English. He wrote 2 Broadway musicals and produced them simultaneously, and wrote and performed spoken word albums that many have called forebears of rap. Over the course of his life, he was also a cable car driver in San Francisco, a portrait painter in Mexico City, a street performer in Paris, a stock options trader in New York, the navigator of an Air Force bomber, a postal worker, a visual artist, and, by his own account, a very successful gigolo. Mr. Van Peebles grandly called himself the Rosa Parks of black cinema. Along with Gordon Parks, whose 1971 film Shaft lionized a streetwise black detective, he was among the first black filmmakers to reach a wide general audience. I would also recommend everybody look into Gordon Parks, who began his career as an incredibly successful photographer before he made Shaft, actually decades before. Sweetback, Shaft, and numerous knockoffs released throughout the 1970s were a response to new militancy among young urban black people. The movie's casts were mainly black, and the music was mainly funk and soul. Racial put-downs of whites were common, as were sex, violence, and critiques of capitalism and police brutality. Sound familiar? This is exactly the kind of movie this mother wants her daughter seeing. And I do recommend Sweetback's badass song because the movie itself is badass. Many displayed a slick coolness, some romanticized outlaws. Some critics complained that the genre perpetrated racist myths and stereotypes. After Superfly, the story of a cocaine dealer directed by Mr. Parks' son Gordon Jr., was released in 1972, the term blaxploitation, a combination of black and exploitation, came into general use. The NAACP joined with other civil rights groups to form the Coalition Against Blaxploitation. In an interview with the New York Times Magazine in 1972, Mr. Van Peebles countered that he was challenging the false black images that white people used to confuse, drain, and colonize our minds. Melvin Van Peebles was born on the south side of Chicago on August 21st, 1932. Van was originally his middle name. He later made it part of his last name. The son of a tailor, he grew up in Phoenix, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago. He attended the historically black West Virginia State College before transferring to Ohio Wesleyan University, where he joined the ROTC and majored in English literature. By the way, here's a man to be admired by anybody, not just anybody who's interested in film. I mean, an incredible American, I dare say. After graduating at age 20 in 1953, he joined the Air Force, becoming a navigator on a B-47 bomber for 3 years. While in the service, he married Maria Marx, a German actress. After his discharge, Mr. Van Peebles could not get hired by a commercial airline, so the newlyweds went to Mexico City, where their son Mario was born. They later had a daughter, Megan, who died in 2006. In addition to Mario, he is survived by another son, Max, a daughter, Marguerite Van Peebles, and 11 grandchildren. Mr. Van Peebles painted portraits in Mexico before moving to San Francisco, where he worked in the post office and drove cable cars. The cable car experience inspired his first book, The Big Heart, in 1957. He made several short films in San Francisco, then moved on to Hollywood to pursue his cinematic dream. But the only job he could find there was as an elevator operator. Emigrating to the Netherlands, he studied astronomy, a personal fascination, at the University of Amsterdam, and acting at the Dutch National Theater. His marriage ended in divorce, and he hitchhiked to Paris. He sang for Coings Outside Theaters, wrote magazine articles about crime, and helped edit a humor magazine. He lived, he later recalled, on $600 a year. Mr. Van Peebles told People magazine in 1982 that he had supplemented this meager income by ingratiating himself with rich women. I had a lady for each day of the week, he said. I only had to worry about my back giving out. God bless you, sir. He wrote 5 novels and a volume of short stories that were published in French. Several novels were also published in English, among them A Bear for the FBI in 1968. Martin Levin, reviewing it in the Times, praised it for whizzing brilliantly through the memories of a Chicago boyhood, much like the authors. After discovering that the French cultural authorities financed films based on works written in French, Mr. Van Peebles won a subsidy to turn his novel, La Permission, into the film, The Story of a 3-Day Pass. It told of a black soldier being harassed by his white comrades for having a white girlfriend. The movie had its premiere at the 1967 Chicago Film Festival, where it won the Critics' Choice Award. Columbia Pictures hired him to direct Watermelon Man from 1970, a satirical comedy about a white bigot played by Godfrey Cambridge, who turns into a black man. Does that sound familiar? People who like C. Thomas Howell, who, by the way, is in True Noir. and also James Earl Jones. Columbia wanted Van Peebles to shoot alternative endings, in one in which the protagonist becomes a black militant and another in which he discovers it was all a dream. Mr. Van Peebles said he forgot to shoot the second ending. Disliking working for a studio, he set out to be an independent filmmaker. To make Sweetback for $500,000, he combined his $70,000 savings with loans, used a non-union crew, and persuaded a film lab to extend him credit. The plot of the movie concerns a man who attacks 2 crooked police officers and then escapes as a fugitive to Mexico, vowing to return and collect some dues. Only 2 theaters in Detroit and Atlanta would show the movie at first, but it caught fire and for several weeks outgrossed Love Story. Its American box office exceeded $15 million, about $100 million in today's money, a bonanza for an independent film at the time. The film's success enabled Mr. Van Peebles to stage a musical he wrote, Ain't Supposed to Die a Natural Death, on Broadway in 1971, with an initial personal investment of $150,000. The show was largely a dramatization of several albums he made in the late 60s that have been called a precursor of rap music because his words were spoken rather than sung, and his theme addressed the inner life of the dispossessed. Junkies, prostitutes, and crooked cops told their stories. Advance sales were almost nil and reviews were tepid, so Mr. Van Peebles personally promoted the show to black churches and fraternal groups within a 200-mile radius. Their members came by the busload. The success of Natural Death led him to open on Broadway a second show he'd written, Don't Play Us Cheap, in May 1972, starting a new production so late in the season, not to mention shepherding 2 Broadway ventures at once. One was called Lunacy, but both made money. The new show was as carefree as the first one was gritty, and it got glowing reviews. Clive Barnes of the Times called it a sprawling, rambunctious, great-hearted show. It was turned into a movie in 1973. Mr. Van Peebles received Tony Award nominations for Best Book and Best Original Score for Ain't Supposed to Die a Natural Death, as well as a Drama Desk Award for Most Promising Book. Don't Play Us Cheap brought him a Tony nomination for Best Book. A revival of Natural Death, mounted with the collaboration of Mario Van Peebles and under the direction of Kenny Leon, is scheduled to open on Broadway next year. Mr. Van Peebles went on to act in movies and on television and occasionally to direct, sometimes in collaboration with his son Mario. In a Manhattan gallery, he exhibited paintings and mixed media works that he'd created. He wrote off-Broadway plays. He started a band called Melvin Van Peebles Wid Laxative. His business acumen drew almost as much comment as his artistic gifts. He once called himself a one-man conglomerate. In the mid-1980s, Mr. Van Peebles was one of the few black options traders in the American Stock Exchange, making deals like always, he said. He wrote a book about it, Bold Money, How to Get Rich in the Options Market, from 1986. In his 80s, Mr. Van Peebles, who was easily recognizable by his flowing white beard and was seldom without a soggy, occasionally lit cigar, was still running for exercise 5 times a week and sounding as irascible as ever. He joked that he would not receive recognition for his body of work until he became more feeble. Right now, I'm a little too dangerous, he said in 2013. I intend to stay dangerous. If that's not a man you should learn about a life well lived, I don't know what is. Now, I don't know, should an 11th grade girl taking a overview film class learn about that? Maybe not. But you know what? If you're a mother, why don't you sit down with your daughter and you guys can watch Sweet Sweetback's badass song and talk about it. Don't keep your child sheltered and look into the life of Mario and Melvin, Melvin Van Peebles and his son Mario, because in his own right, Mario also became a very storied director. He even made an episode of Wise Guy. But Melvin Van Peebles is one of the most dynamic filmmakers to have ever lived in the United States. And he's somebody, hey, if I was teaching an 11th grade film class, I'd certainly be teaching about that. Don't know if the kids would love it. I certainly don't think the parents would, but it's what you're asking for. Because if you're asking for a different perspective, what you want is a perspective that you agree with. But I think if you're looking for an interesting perspective, look for a perspective that maybe you don't agree with. Maybe that will make you learn something. Maybe take you out of your comfort zone. And that's what school's all about. Right? Right? So there you go. But I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. Since we're talking about a woman that wants her daughter to learn about filmmakers, here's one for you. Maya Deren, who was born on April 29th, 1917, and died October 13th, 1961. Now, I will tell you that anybody who has ever gone to film school knows who Maya Deren is. But maybe if you've never gone to film school, you wouldn't. And that's why I'm here. If I can even find what I want to read, because I know it's here somewhere, I would like to read to you about Maya Deren and a movie we've all seen a million times, Meshes in the Afternoon. Here it is. Maya Deren. I found it. There we go. Maya Deren was one of the most important avant-garde filmmakers of her time for her use of experimental editing techniques and her fascination with ecstatic religious dances. Deren earned an MA in English Literature from Smith in 1939 before joining choreographer Katherine Dunham's tour. Deren then moved to Los Angeles, where she wrote, after marrying her second husband, motion picture photographer Sasha Hamid, in 1942. She collaborated with him on avant-garde films. Adept at marketing, Deren rented a playhouse in Greenwich Village to exhibit her movies, created her own distribution company, and established the Creative Film Foundation. In 1946, she used a Guggenheim Fellowship to photograph Haitian dance and became enthralled with the voodoo ritual. In 1953, Deren wrote The Divine Horsemen, The Living Gods of Haiti. For a woman who is to transform film, it is fitting that Maya Deren was born in Russia in 1917 during the birth of the revolution. Born Elnora Derenkowski in Kyiv, Ukraine, on April 29, 1917, the only child of Marie Fiedler and Solomon David Derenkowski, she was named after Eleanor Duse, the eminent Italian actor. With pogroms continuing in Ukraine to 1922, Eleanor Derenkowski's family fled to America. So in addition to learning about Maya Deren, you can learn something about Jewish history and why Israel is such an important place. They landed in New York and later joined family members in Ohio, while her father studied at Syracuse University for his American degree in medicine. A psychiatrist, Dr. Derenkowski was appointed as an assistant physician at the Syracuse State School for Mental Defectives. In 1928, the Derenkowskis became naturalized American citizens and shortened the family name to Deren. Deren attended both elementary and high schools in Syracuse. She spent 1930 to 1933 in Geneva, Switzerland, at the League of Nations International School, where she pursued her desire to write. She returned to Syracuse in 1933, entering Syracuse University to study journalism and political science. There, she met and married fellow student Gregory Bardaki, whose Russian Jewish family had moved to Harbin, China, Bardaki's birthplace, before emigrating to America. In 1935, Deren and Bardaki moved to New York City, where he became a union organizer. I don't think I'm saying Bardaki correctly, but I don't know how to pronounce it. Both she and her husband were actively involved in the American Socialist movement. Many thought Deren's socialist leanings served as a replacement for Judaism. Her father, whom she adored, was agnostic. Clearly aware of her Jewish roots, she felt no affinity for her religion or culture. Though aware of problems for Jews in the world, Deren looked to socialism as the cure for such issues. Indeed, socialism allowed her to merge her Jewish identity into a universalist worldview. She rarely made reference to her Jewishness. Apart from her political activities, Deren finished her BA degree at New York University in 1936. By 1938, she and Bardaki were divorced. At this juncture, Deren attended Smith College, completing her master's degree in English literature in June of 1939. You know what? I think everybody gets the idea. But Maya Deren, look her up. Look her up on your own. Read more about her. Why not? Very interesting stuff. I don't know if that's what a mother wants to hear, but hey, it's interesting, historical, why not? I've got someone else to tell you about. Since you are a girl after all, here's another African-American filmmaker, a black filmmaker. Julie Dash, somebody more contemporary. Julie Dash made a movie. Then Hollywood shut her out. There she is. Kind of a babe. One day late in April, this, by the way, was written by Cara Buckley on November 18th, 2016. One day late in April, filmmaker Julie Dash got a phone call from her daughter. "Welcome to Bay Hive," her daughter said. "What are you talking about?" Miss Dash replied. Beyoncé had just dropped her visual album, Lemonade, a luscious tone poem and lover's revenge fantasy featuring prominent black women and girls. In its mood and imagery, women wearing gauzy white gowns, wading through water, perching on a mossy tree, savvy viewers identified a deep influence. Miss Dash's 1991 film, Daughters of the Dust. Warmly received and lavishly praised for its beauty and dreamlike narrative, Daughters tells the tale of Gula, women on the South Sea island off the southeastern United States in the early 1900s who are tugged north by the Great Migration. It was the first feature film by an African-American woman to have a wide release, an achievement sullied only by the icy reception that Hollywood gave Miss Dash back then and pretty much ever since. It took Beyoncé, who has not met the filmmaker and whose representative could not confirm the film's influence on Lemonade, and her bayhive of followers to bring Daughters renewed and wider renown. And it came at an auspicious time for Miss Dash. The movie, which is listed in the National Film Registry, has been digitally restored by its new distributor, the Cohen Film Collection, and has received a re-release this month at Manhattan's Film Forum. But though Miss Dash has spent years approaching Hollywood studios with projects, Daughters remains the only feature film she's been able to make. It sounds familiar. I pitched every existing studio out there and every mini major from A to Z, Miss Dash 66 said over morning coffee in early September here in Toronto, where the film festival was screening Daughters to celebrate its 25th anniversary. She also couldn't get an agent. Even though Daughters drew capacity crowds during its 1992 run at Film Forum, followed by a months-long engagement at the Village East Cinema. One agency told me I had no future, Miss Dash said. Another company, a mini major, said it was a fluke. Some filmmakers may have seen in her a cautionary tale. The picture was well received, yet indie and experimental. A lot of people looked at Julie and said, I'm not going that way. Look what happened to Julie. And Clyde Taylor, a film scholar and African-American, said Clive Taylor, a film scholar and African-American cultural historian. A prevailing narrative about Miss Dash is that as an independent black female filmmaker, she, along with her work, would probably receive far more attention and support had she emerged today. Among those who hold this view is Anna DuVernay, the director of the feature Selma and the documentary 13th. By the way, I have a massive crush on Ava DuVernay. She's a babe. And she's a good filmmaker. And her 13th documentary is amazing. I don't know Ava DuVernay, but she's awesome. Who describes Miss Dash as the queen of it all. Despite being thwarted in her effort to make more feature films, Miss Dash has worked steadily, writing a novel and directing television movies, commercials, films for museums, and documentaries. When I look at the way I'm able to move between indie features and studio features, Miss DuVernay said, and oh, I'll make the Apple commercial, and oh, I'll make a piece for the Smithsonian, and oh, I'll make a documentary, all of the ways that I'm able to shapeshift, Julie has been able to do that. She was just too early. She was ahead of her time. Indeed, with the re-release, Daughters might prove to be ahead of its time still. In many ways, it's a foreign film, Ms. Taylor said. Maybe it's ahead of its time, and time will have to catch up. The foreign film feel of Daughters was by design. Raised in the Queensboro Housing Project in Long Island City, Queens, Miss Dash earned a degree in film production at City College and went on to be a fellow at the American Film Institute before beginning a master's degree at the University of California, Los Angeles, film school in the 70s. Like other young black filmmakers there, Miss Dash was impassioned and influenced by avant-garde Latin American, African, and Russian cinema. Together, the loose collective of students pursued new ways of visual storytelling while resisting commercial pressures. Not only were there tremendous trash phenomenon of blaxploitation movies, there was the background, but black filmmakers were expected to make movies with that kind of junk in it, Mr. Taylor said. The work of UCLA film students such as Charles Burnett, To Sleep with Anger, Larry Clark, Passing Through, Haley Garima, Sankofa, and Miss Dash was a rebuke to all of that. In 1986, Mr. Taylor curated a retrospective of their work at the Whitney Museum and called the show the LA Rebellion. The name stuck, and even though Daughters was still 5 years away, it would later be considered part of that movement too. I learned I was part of the LA Rebellion after the LA Rebellion rebelled, Miss Dash said. It's a cute little name, but we were just making films together. There was a long road to making Daughters. In the 1980s, Miss Dash wanted to explore the lives of black women at the turn of the previous century. She zeroed in on the Sea Islands off South Carolina and Georgia, which during slavery were a stopping point for many West African captives after the Middle Passage. The Sea Islands are sacred ground. They represent our Ellis Island, Miss Dash said in a making-of short about the film. She spent years researching the slaves' descendants, the Gula, their language, customs, religious beliefs, and cuisine, and was able to begin production after PBS's American Playhouse provided a big chunk of their $800,000 budget. The crew members spent months in pre-production. They made furniture, sweetgrass baskets, and gowns using fabrics from the early 1900s. A linguist taught the actors how to speak the Gula's Creole language. In the making-of short, Miss Dash said she also decided in typical male-oriented Western narrative structure was not appropriate for the film. She also decided a typical male-oriented Western narrative structure was not appropriate for the film. I decided to let the story unravel itself in a way in which an African griot would tell the story, since that's part of our tradition, Miss Dash said in the short. So the story kind of unfolds throughout this day and a half in various vignettes. It unfolds, comes back, it unfolds, and it comes back. Critics hailed the film's original, daring, and sincere conception, The Reader in Chicago, and called it an extended, wildly lyrical meditation on the power of African cultural iconography. The New York Times. And Miss Dash found a distributor, Kino International, sponsor of this channel. Yes, they are, believe it or not. Though many Americans remained unaware of the film, it gained an international following, and in 2009, a retrospective of her work was held in Taiwan. I've traveled with daughters all over the world, Miss Dash said. Along with reveling in the film's restoration, re-release, and Beyoncé-born attention, Miss Dash was recently inducted, to her delight, into the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences as part of its efforts to diversify its membership. She yearns to do more work. Her array of story ideas, a miniseries about African-American women serving overseas in World War II, a movie about a family of traveling black magicians, burning brightly in her mind, further ignited by TV's broad new reach. But Miss Dash is still having trouble getting through the door. The agent she eventually ended up with died years ago, and for all her efforts, she said, she has not been able to get another one since. Again, all these stories are out there. The films are out there to see. But you got to look for them. It's not up to a teacher to tell you all of these things because there's too many. They're too voluminous. What a teacher is there to do is to instill a love of film in your child, not to give that child an overview of all of cinema history. You, as a parent, get to pick up what it's like a baton. You know, a child can learn as much as they can learn in school, but it's up to a parent to continue that education. Go see these movies together. Seek them out. Don't expect a teacher to give every single kid an overview that every one of their parents expects them to have. A teacher can only instill a love of cinema into a person. It can't make that person go out and explore film themselves. People have to take responsibility. Parents have to take responsibility. If you want your child to have a great overview of cinema, and hey, if you really wanted to go see Sofia Coppola's work and Greta Gerwig's work, you can go see Barbie together. Maybe rent The Virgin Suicides. I don't know. But why do you call a teacher and tell them that they're supposed to service your particular daughter's needs? Why don't you do that yourself? There's a big world out there. That's what I would do. And you know what? Because you asked about more female filmmakers, I've got one more filmmaker that I would like to bring up. A female filmmaker that doesn't get enough credit. I talked to you about Gordon Parks, but again, look up Gordon Parks for yourself because it's very interesting. My last filmmaker that I'm going to leave you with tonight is Doris Wishman. Here's Doris Wishman. And this comes to us from Senses of Cinema. I don't know. This comes from the great directors. But here we go. Doris Wishman, the most prolific woman filmmaker of all time, died on August 10th, 2002 in Miami after a long battle with cancer, lymphoma. She was still making production notes and joking that she was writing the screenplay for another film within days of her passing. After I die, I will be making movies in hell, Wishman quipped several times. Most of her 30 films were sexploitation films, with a few exceptions. She made films that played double and triple bills at drive-in movie theaters, 42nd Street grindhouses, and the theaters specializing in adults-only features. She made 26 features between 1959 and 1977. The 27th feature, a gory horror film, was released in 1983. After a long semi-retirement, Wishman made 3 more films between 1999 and 2002. Wishman was an innovative low-budget filmmaker. Her directing, editing, and marketing of her films was all self-taught, and almost all of her films were self-produced. Wishman's films often featured handheld tracking shots that would be interrupted by cutaways to bizarre shots of ashtrays, bric-a-brac, and characters' knees, hands, and feet. It was easier to dub voices into her films if she didn't have to worry about matching the actors' and non-actors' lips to the dialogue. Her cutaways were not only creative cost-saving devices, she sometimes used them to build suspense or display a dark, quirky sense of humor. Doris Wishman lied about her age, and it was recently discovered by her nephew, Norman Wishman, that she was born on July 23, 1912. She was 90 years old at the time of her death. Michael Bowen has been working on an extensive and comprehensive biography of Wishman for nearly 4 years. She liked to make up stories about herself and make things even more exciting and interesting than they really were, he explained. She can also be a very difficult person to deal with sometimes. He said several months ago when I was trying to coordinate an interview with Wishman for a magazine article. Doris was the cousin of low-budget film producer Max Rosenberg. He was one of the founders of Britain's Amicus Films. But she carved out her own career completely on her own. She made her first film, Hideout in the Sun, in 1959, the year after she became a widow. The film had a strong influence on prolific exploitation producer Dave Friedman and the entire exploitation industry in general. Friedman would eventually produce the Herschel Gordon Lewis directed classics Blood Feast, Color Me Blood Red, and 2000 Maniacs. Friedman and Wishman were in some ways competitors, but also wound up being friends. Wishman's best-known films are Nude on the Moon, Bad Girls Go to Hell, Deadly Weapons, and Double Agent 73. Her last commercially distributed film released was 1983's A Night to Dismember, now available as an elite DVD with the only commentary track she ever recorded. However, she completed 2 more films, Satan Was a Lady and Dildo Heaven, also known as Desperate Desires, and was in post-production on a 3rd film, Each Time I Kill, at the time of her death. This last film features cameos by Fred Schneider of the B-52s, former 1980 Scream King Linnea Quigley, and if all goes according to plan, John Waters will still film his planned cameo as well. It was right after principal photography on the film ended in June that the seriousness of Wishman's lymphoma was discovered, and she began intensive chemotherapy treatment in an effort to prolong her life. Unfortunately, the chemotherapy was too much for her to take, and there was all kinds of complications, Bowen said. She was not able to speak during the last couple of weeks of her life, but Wishman scribbled notes to family, friends, and doctors. She also wrote instructions on how she expected the film to be finished. The 8 nude cuties she made from the late 50s and early 60s are naive dated films, while the roughy films, which Wishman helped pioneer, were usually extremely misogynistic, slightly less so in Wishman's own films, and violent, and the softcore films of the 70s were the forerunners of the direct-to-video erotic film, or what is often referred to as the Skinamax cable movies. These are not in the same league as hardcore porn films. Wishman for years denied that she ever directed any X-rated films, but she has much admitted in interviews and certainly in conversations to others that she might have had something to do with the X-rated Satan Was a Lady in 1975 and Come With Me, My Love in 1976. These 2 pictures were not made by Doris, explains C. Davis Smith, a good friend and the cinematographer on 17 of Doris's 30 movies, or at least that's what she told people for many years. I, however, was there behind the camera with Doris at my elbow. She's short, you know. One thing, though, Doris would not shoot the explicit scenes. She would say, "Go ahead and do what you have to do," retiring to another room until we told her we were done. My Aunt Doris was the baby in a family of 5 children, 3 girls and 2 boys, explained 77-year-old Norman Wishman. My father was next to the oldest. My Aunt Pearl is the only one left. I think she's 94 and lives in Coral Gables, Florida, where Doris also resided. There were 2 sides to my Aunt Doris. She was very family devoted and was on call whenever she was needed. very rarely talked about her movies, and that's why my sister and I were surprised of how many people loved her. My sister, Sheila Lips, who's 70, who lives in Miami, told me if she and Doris were eating in a diner, little kids somehow were attracted to my aunt and would come over to their table. There was just that something that was in her body language, and it was Pearl who lent Doris Wishman the $10,000 needed to make her first film. The money was paid back, and most of Doris's films were made from then on through a combination of personal funds and credit, at least until A Night to Dismember. Wishman did not just film nature girls and boys in a nudist colony, but instead created a plot and character. Yes, the characters like to watch nudists play volleyball and swim, but Wishman revolutionized and suggested how to almost legitimize the adults-only sexploitation film. She loved the process of making movies, writing outlandish plots, experimenting with camera angles, and figuring out how to put it all together in the editing room. She tried to make decent films that offered the audience something a little different, even if she didn't have a fraction of the money she needed to succeed. Few filmmakers made so much with so little. She was also a woman making films in the utterly male-dominated subgenre of exploitation. In the already male-dominated feature film business, she wasn't working for a man, nor given a film by a studio head who believed in having women direct an exploitation movie was a great gimmick. In fact, often Doris used her husband's name or made up a male name rather than use her own. Independent low-budget exploitation and sexploitation filmmakers were also concerned with censorship laws, as several parts of the country enforced their blue laws, while others were inconsistent regarding their own local ordinances and the still enforced Hays Code. Wishman found the money to make her movies, produced nearly all of them, wrote, directed, cast, and often edited them as well. She turned down offers to work with her cousin Rosenberg or as a director for Dave Friedman, Sam Lake, and others. She made her films exactly the way she wanted to make them. Sometimes she had to get tough and collect money from exhibitors as well. She was also one of the few low-budget filmmakers who paid her bills on time and had a reputation for being trustworthy and honest. She might have made nude cuties, roughies, and sleazy softcore movies, but there was nothing sleazy about Doris's character or business practices. She was tough, salty, full of quirks and idiosyncrasies, but she was a smart, sharp, authentic, self-made businesswoman and artist, all 4 feet 11 inches of her. So, if you're a teacher and you get a call from someone's mom in 11th grade and says, hey, why don't you teach my daughter about female filmmakers or people of color filmmakers? Here you go. Here's a starting place for a few. And, or better yet, why do you have to call teachers? They're trying to do their best. Why do you give them such a hard time? Why don't you, as a mother, take it upon yourself to educate your daughter about cinema history? Why don't you read cinema history together? Go see movies together. Go look up films that you've never heard of before. There's lots of lists of great female directors and people of color. Look them up. Watch them together. Talk about them. Don't browbeat a teacher. You know, they can only do so much, and they've got all kinds of other students to deal with. And while you're at it, why don't you go watch movies from different countries that you might never have heard of? Go look up the Apu trilogy from India. Any film school student will tell you about that. Look that one up. You'll love to watch that with your kids. It's uplifting and heartwarming. No, but you should watch it. The Apu trilogy is great. I'm just kidding. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say tonight. What do you guys? I'm sure like no one's even watching this episode. Like, Rob, what are you talking about? Anyway, let's see. Let's see what you guys are saying. Let's jump in. See what you guys have to say. Steve, Cantano? Steve. Cantano, right? Cantanillo? Steve Cantanillo. I ran into my high school science teacher at a golf course. I know exactly what you mean, Mr. B. I am 40, but I know too well. It was a different time for sure. I'm glad you got that, Steve. Steve Cantino, right? Steve Cantino. I think I fucked it up. I'm sorry. I tried, though. A performing artist says, holy crap, I haven't caught you in live forever. Your dream director collaboration, examples, Paul Verhoeven and Brian De Palma making an erotic thriller. I'd rather have Verhoeven do it than De Palma, but that's, I don't know if I wouldn't want two directors to collaborate. One of the things, especially on an erotic thriller, I mean, if you look at Verhoeven's Dutch eroticism, whether it's in Katie Tipple or Turkish Delight, or Turkish Delight, especially Turkish Delight, Spetters, The Fourth Man, Basic Instinct, I like his brand. De Palma's different, but yeah, I would love to see De Palma do, he's done erotic stuff before. By the way, Body Double coming out. Body Double, which is 40 years old, coming out on 4K with Frankie Goes to Hollywood performing. Eric K says, popping in to wish you a happy birthday, Rob. There you go. Dan Candy says, happy birthday, Chief Running Mouth. Rhaegar Targaryen says, hey guys, I did not see that coming. Lucas De Fiore says, hey Rob, if you could only watch the movie catalog past and future from one film studio, which studio would you choose? That's a good one. That's tough. That's a hard one. Probably Warner Brothers. Maybe. But, I mean, so many. Toho. Golden Harvest. No, probably Warner Brothers. Mario Lopez has been a member of this channel for 41 months. That's amazing. Thank you, Mario Lopez. NGR 1984 says, I ended up becoming very good friends with my 6th grade elementary school teacher. She still checks in on me and even flew from Worcester, Massachusetts to LA for my wedding 9 years ago. Well, that's really cool. I love that. Major Chai Chai says, on the subject of introducing new perspectives, I'm taking my teens to see Blazing Saddles at a theater today. Wow, I can't wait to see what you got to report back on that one, because wow, that is going to be, I would think, rather amazing. 1001 Johnny says, part 1, trying to be on the spirit of considering different filmmakers, I'd like to consider the differences between when men tell stories and when women tell stories. Furthermore, when a story is meant for men or for women, but still for everyone. That's a good point. Very good point to make. Yeah. But I think great stories, whether they're directed to females or males, great stories should work for everybody. Everybody should be able to get something out of a great story. It doesn't matter who it's for. And you know what? The more specific a story, even if it's directed at a certain group or a certain ethnicity or a certain sexuality, great stories transcend that. And I think great stories, no matter what they're about, should work for everybody. Let's see. Robert Giacchini. What am I doing with these names today? You're killing me, you guys. I hate to say them. We always get names wrong on the internet. Giacinta. It's Giacinta? Robert Giacinta. That's a cool name, right? Up late on the East Coast. Thanks for the always insightful videos. I don't always know what you're talking about, but I always feel like I learned something. Well, I appreciate that, Robert. That's like the nicest thing you could possibly say. That's very nice. Tom Jr. Jackson says, happy birthday, Bobby B. Let's set something up and do an interview. Let's do it. Congrats on the Kickstarter goal meeting its goal. Amazing show with a great topic. Oh, well, thank you. It's not my normal fare. People are going to probably unsubscribe, but I am trying to make something interesting, right? Scott Bartholomew says, have you done a review of The Human Centipede by Tom Six? No, I have not. I have not. I'm not a big fan of that movie as much as I should be. I love exploitation. Major Chai Chai says, I never watched a movie as a kid and thought that people don't look like me or cared who directed or wrote it. I just wanted to go on the adventure. I totally agree with that. 100%. Just go along with the adventure. I totally agree with that. Let's see. I want to make sure that I've got everybody's. I did Lucas's Rhaegar. I think I've got everything. Popping in, wish you happy birthday. Chief Running Mouth, got all that. Yep, I am caught up. The second part of 1001 Johnny's tip says, the hero's journey, I think, is really a young man's journey more so than a young woman's journey. If the trials of Hercules are for men to learn from, I'd like to think Eros and Psyche is the story for a young woman to learn from. Well, I think that's probably true, but I think those stories can be, people can like all of those things. What's really interesting that I find so strange today about the modern age is we want to deny, look, if you take aside, let's take aside gender identity and all of that, we are locked into our biology. And a lot of our biology does define the kinds of stories that men and women are drawn towards. I mean, so much time is now spent on different gender identities and all that. But look, if you're born as a biological woman, from the time you're very, very young, you have something that I, as a man, don't have. You think about your mother as you're being mothered. You think that someday you too might become a mother. This is something that a man will never know, does not have that perspective, is not thinking about that from the time that you're born. So, I don't know what that's like. I don't know what those concerns are because I'll never know. I wasn't born a woman, so I'm not going to know. But I do find it interesting that perspective of the potential, the idea of having a child, is something that permeates a woman's life. My mother delivered a stillborn child. The woman that adopted me delivered a stillborn child, which I can't even begin to imagine what that was like, and then decided to adopt. So I was adopted. But to become a mother and to have that taken away from you, to literally carry a child to term that is born still, I mean, that is something internal that I can read about it. I can intellectually understand it, but I could never feel what that feeling is. I'll never know. And I think that, there's nothing wrong with acknowledging that. Everybody wants to jump in and wants to define things and change things around. But for the majority of people on the planet, that is something that defines stories. Men do different things than women, and that's okay. We can't help it. Our biology defines us that way and has for thousands and thousands of years. Now, that doesn't mean perspectives, as we're seeing in the modern age, are changing, because they are. But still, for the majority of the world, the biological differences define certain stories that are appealing to men and women, and all kinds of stories. I mean, I like stories about people, and whether you're going to tell an LGBTQ story or a story about trans people, I find stories fascinating. I think that the most important thing about a story is it provides a truthful perspective about the characters that the story is about. That's what I'm looking for, because I love storytelling, and I think it's the easiest and best way to convey a person's lived-in experience to others. I have tended to understand the world, whether it's novels, whether it's albums, whether it's movies, whatever. The best of those things, the things that I've loved the most, and I don't care what stories. I don't care if you're a gay or straight director, a male or female director, if you're whatever part of the world you're from. Tell me a story that's truthful, and I'll go on that journey with you. And I think truthful stories are self-evident. I mean, I think they really are. And that's what I want. I want truthful stories. And I think that's what everybody wants. And the thing is, lately, we've been forcing things into stories, and they don't seem truthful. And I think that's what has been problematic when everybody gets mad at things. It's because stories are being bent and changed for outside reasons. And we can all tell when a story is not authentic. And I'm not talking about seeing yourself represented in a story. I'm talking about the tale that's being told. And you can tell if that story is truthful or not. You can feel it. We can all feel it, I think. Rhaegar Targaryen says, we watched the Star Wars trilogy every Christmas growing up. I also watched Superman, Star Trek, The Next Generation, and Batman. Never did it occur to me to think the guys who directed those aren't black, so you cannot enjoy this. it's so bizarre. Or the people that directed this are black and you should enjoy it. I mean, that's the thing. It doesn't really matter. Great filmmakers come from all over the place. I mean, I've never once thought, you're not going to get me to not watch Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song. I loved blaxploitation movies when I was a kid. I wanted to be those people. I wanted to be Slaughter. I wanted to be Shaft. You know, I wanted to be Dolomite because he had a dong as big as King Kong, which I did not, sadly. I am the human tornado. I loved all that shit when I was a kid. Scott Bartholomew says, give us an orgasmic Trek rant tonight. No, man, I'm done. I'm done with Trek. I'm done with Trek. Trek's done with me. I'm done with Trek. No more Trek rants. I've done it. I've said everything I can say. Michael Preston says, hi, Rob. I feel like Marvel keeps announcing movie projects but seems to not focus on one good movie. It's becoming rather discouraging. I agree. Look, as everyone knows, I dearly love the Infinity Saga. Iron Man to Spider-Man Far From Home. The end of Phase 3. Loved it. For the most part, those 23 movies, can't get enough. Can't get enough. Love them. But yeah, they kind of lost their way. They had a lot of pressure put on them. When you have Disney Plus, a streamer that was literally built upon Star Wars. Look, the Disney Plus platform damaged the Star Wars and Marvel brands beyond what anybody can possibly imagine. Because why? Easy. Disney thinks of Star Wars and Marvel as a brand. That's how they're understood at the corporate level. They don't understand that Disney and Marvel became a brand that people love because of the stories that were delivered by them. And the Marvel Cinematic Universe came out strong with Iron Man and kept getting stronger and gave us, bangers. Captain America, Winter Soldier, and Civil War. Of course, Infinity War and Endgame. All those things. Because why? They were true to themselves. And then what Disney comes along and does and says, okay, Marvel, they don't think to themselves, we need to give them the time and the tools and the talent to make stuff. They just were making stuff because that's what Disney Plus wanted. That's what their corporate overlords wanted. And we get a mess of a show like She-Hulk. What a waste of material because, the people who were making that show, I'm not going to go look at the John Byrne version of She-Hulk. Certainly not. We're going to do our own. And look what you wind up getting. Something that disappointed everybody. And disappointed a talented cast. But that's what they did. Because no one thinks, oh, maybe just because you have a brand name doesn't mean that people are going to go see that if the material isn't good. Star Wars and Marvel became what they became because they told beloved stories underneath those banners. You can't just manufacture Star Wars or Marvel stories willy-nilly. You have to understand what makes those stories great, and then you have to get the people that understand how to work within the context of those stories. But not according to Disney. And look what happened. Both of those brands have been irrevocably damaged. Now, I think Kevin Feige will pull it out. I mean, Deadpool and Wolverine, that's a fluke. Let's see where we're going with Agatha All Along, which starts next week, or Captain America Brave New World. That'll be telling, although both of those things they were started under the old regime, so let's see where they go. I'm really interested to see. To me, the new Marvel begins with Fantastic Four. That doesn't mean Thunderbolts won't be great. That doesn't mean anything else won't be great, but I think that that's where we're going to start to see Kevin Feige's influence come back. We'll see. Gatekeeper, love it. Gatekeeper says, really enjoyed you on my favorite streamer show. You have so much media knowledge. Wish you continued success. That's very nice. Shout out Gary, Diabolical Souls, Nerd Wars. Please subscribe to the Angry Badger. Yeah, I've been streaming with Angry Badger on Chris Gore's Versus show on Mondays, which has been fun. I'm glad you thought so. Thanks. I mean, of course, a lot of people took me to task for that, but you know what? I'll tell you something. Gary Beekler is a hell of a guy. He's a really nice guy. He treats his audience really respectfully. I mean, if you've ever gone to one of his meetups, they're really actually inspiring. And they really are. And I meet a lot of great people. I met Angry Badger in person, actually, at Comic-Con. And I love Gary's wife. So he, respectfully. But it's great stuff. 1001 Johnny says part 3. Oh, hang on a second. I don't know if I got that. Oh, no, I got that. 1001 Johnny says part 3. And this might be a more controversial take. I think Alien, while it is for everyone, I think every entry by having a female protagonist has defined itself as a woman-centered franchise. Oh, I totally agree. What is Alien, as my friend Charlie would say? Alien is about birth, Aliens is about life, and Alien 3 is about death. And I would say that, and literally in Aliens, you have two females that have a strong sense of the life-giving force within them, giving them strength in a different way that, look, none of the men could face the alien queen. It was only Ripley who had lost her daughter Amy after 57 years in hypersleep, and the surrogate daughter Newt she took on. It was that power that only a woman could have that allowed her to face off against another female with a brood, the alien queen. And that was definitely an undercurrent, and the whole idea of birth is an undercurrent to all of those movies. I mean, look what happens. You could make it look like, look, anybody who's affected by a face hugger and implanting an embryo in your body, but when Cain gives birth, doesn't go so well. An alien, make of that what you will. Miss 50 and still metal, says Melvin Van Peebles and Doris Wishman. What a great list. Congratulations on True Noir, Rob. Well, Miss 50 and still metal, it's always good to have you here late night. I really appreciate that. And I thought it was just a fun list. What I wanted to do was I wanted to get filmmakers that I think, by the way, are very, very important filmmakers, but also really interesting people. Melvin Van Peebles is an amazing Renaissance guy. And Gordon Parks too. I had Gordon Parks. I was going to read something about Gordon Parks, but it was too long, because when you started back his career in the 40s and stuff, moving up and when he directed Shaft, I mean, he's another amazing guy. An amazing guy. 1001 Johnny goes on to say, part 3, it's strange to think about a woman's story of heroism is defined by such loss and hardship more than Luke Skywalker ever faced. When all the men have been killed, Dallas, or are inhuman, Ash, who can help the woman? Will they have the strength to fight? Well, I think that's the great part of it. You know, that's what makes Alien really interesting, I think. Crazy Curdy says, Rob, you are a god amongst gods. Well, thank you. I wish I could conjure up more budget for our project. Isn't the android in Romulus being brainwashed by a company slightly... isn't the android in Romulus being brainwashed by a company slightly original and speak to our current 1984 life? Oh, I totally agree. I wish they'd made more of that. I thought that was one of the best parts of Romulus. I mean, I think it was definitely there. But here's the funny thing. I think that I don't know if the androids are bred. There's a weird thing going on where the androids apparently all become psycho amoral killers. I mean, I don't know if that's crazy, but it's odd to me. I mean, Bishop didn't, and Bishop was a company android, you know, and he prefers the term artificial person himself, the first person to say it. But that's an interesting perspective. An interesting perspective. I like that. But I do think that was one of the more original elements in Alien Romulus, and I really love that. I thought that was pretty decent. And on that note, kids, I think I know I'm going to end this chat. Of course, I'll be back with Dieter Bastian tomorrow, and I'm very excited about that. So, yeah, I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank you for generously supporting this chat or this show via super chats and tips and memberships. We'll have a member call next week. It'll be very exciting. Maybe I'll play some of True Noir for you. And yeah. And remember, you can still support True Noir. I think for the next 6 weeks, we're going to leave it open. You can order the series. You can order the physical media. You can order the digital downloads and get it early. You can do that right now at truenoir.co. It's still a Kickstarter, just under True Noir, or if you go to truenoir.co, not com, C-O-M, but C-O, it'll take you right there. We're about to cross $50,000, which would be very exciting. And by the way, True Noir is costing a lot more than that. I mean, this is not covering it's just we wanted to pre-sell the show that gauge some interest. But yeah, we're spending a lot more than 50 grand on this. The actors alone, I'm telling you, you're going to love it. It's turned out great. Carlos Lima has been a member for 8 months. Thank you, Carlos. I very much appreciate that. So I'm going to end this, and I say to all of you, remember, I said it once before tonight, but I'll say it again. Every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And don't make your teachers have to stand in for being a parent to your own kids. I can say that because I don't have kids. So it's easy, although I have been raising Sophie and Zoe along with Elizabeth. So anyway, all of that. Thanks for being here. It was sort of an atypical show, but I thought it was an interesting topic. And hopefully I'll do more of these. We'll see if people like it or people even watch. Thank you all for being here. Have a good night.